Good morning, this is Get Radio. Welcome to the Business Brunch with Ben and Mike. My name is Ben Thompson, I'm a recruitment expert.
And my name's Mike Foster, a business mentor, and together we also run the Oxford Business Community Network. Now, our show introduces you to local trusted experts, whilst also debating a hot topic for local businesses.
On today's show, we look forward to speaking with Kellie Peters of Databasix, Alex Minchin of Zest Digital.
Good morning.
And also Jane Fryatt of Face-to-Face HR.
Morning.
Well, welcome all. Ben and I would certainly like to wish you and all the local businesses listening a successful 2021. 2020 was certainly a challenging year, and over the coming weeks, each Sunday, we'll be looking forward to exploring the hot topics that impact on local businesses. We're particularly interested in how business and the business world is changing right now.
Later in the show, we'll be debating the hot topic around what the business world is looking like with COVID and Brexit going into 2021 with our three guests.
This is Get Radio, and this is the Business Brunch with Ben and Mike. Our first guest today is Kellie Peters of Databasix. Welcome, Kellie.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for having me.
First of all, Kellie, please tell our listeners about yourself and a little bit more about Databasix, please.
So I'm Kellie Peters. I'm the data rockstar at Databasix, and we provide practical advice, guidance and training on all things data protection.
Fantastic. And what sort of things are you helping your clients with right now, Kellie?
It's quite a range, actually. So we have clients asking us to update their website privacy policies, mainly in preparation for Brexit. We have clients looking at training. It's all online because of COVID. So what are the training offerings that we have that could support their range of staff that they have? And then for some of our newer clients, we're starting with audit. So they're not sure how compliant they are with the regulation, and they want to know in a red, amber, green fashion, the good, the bad and the ugly. And then we can come up with an implementation plan to support them become compliant.
Excellent. And I know a couple of years ago, you had a really busy time when the GDPR regulations came out. How are you feeling about Brexit and the news that now we have some sort of deal?
So I was really pleased to read, actually, even though it was on Christmas Eve, I was very pleased to read that there has been an extension of the flows of data for 6 months. So between now and June, companies continue to receive information from Europe, which I think is a great stance, until Europe makes a decision as to whether or not the UK is a safe and secure place to have data transferred to. So for me, I'm very happy that there's a deal, and I'm very happy that they are looking at an adequacy decision for us, because I think it's a lot less painful for organisations than it could have been, to be honest.
Great. And I know conversations that we have when we meet every so often, you do like to celebrate your small successes. So what would you be one of the things that you celebrated of 2020 when we know it's a tough year for many businesses?
I think for me, our biggest achievement was reaching our 7th birthday in November. It was such a tough year last year, and whilst work picked up at the latter part of the year, I think to reach 7 was a real milestone for us. So I was really over the moon when that arrived. I was like, okay, we can make it to Christmas now. Because I'll be honest, there were times where I wasn't sure if that was going to be possible, because who knew what COVID was going to do to us back in March last year.
And one of the things I wanted to ask you today was, when I speak to businesses, I personally don't think many businesses take their data as seriously as they should. It's probably the last thing on their tick list, if you like, of things that they need to do. Do you experience that? Do you feel that?
I do. Typically people groan when I explain to them what I do. It's like, oh, it's data protection. I'm like, yes, it should be something that you take seriously. But I think because it requires a level of investment, it's not something that's free. It's not a priority. It's not going to generate income. Although I do argue that if you can present to your clients and future clients that you are a safe pair of hands where it comes to their data, I think they're more likely to trust you with it. And breaches get in the news every day. So I would argue that invest in that. But certainly it's not a priority for a lot of people. I first contact Maybe my level of enthusiasm encourages people to get a little bit more excited about data protection than they otherwise would.
You are certainly enthusiastic about data. I'll give you that. And and as you've been saying in your podcast, you've been highlighting some of the breaches that have been going on fairly recently. But one of the things I did want to explore to you before we go to your song is why Data Rockstar?
So I've been in the data world now for 20 years, and people always don't get excited about data. They get excited about graphics and analytics. So when we were setting up the company, we were like, well, what do you want to be called? I was like, I want to be a rock star. And it just stuck. And I think it resonates with people. It makes it fun. It makes it funky. So yeah, why not? I own my own company. Why can't I name my own job title?
Yeah, and in my annual awards, I gave you Title of the Year for Data Rockstar. So there you go. And,
Thank you.
And this fun and funky, that's part of your brand as well, isn't it, as a business? Yeah.
Yes. Colourful, fun, funky. Otherwise, people just see it as really dull, and I don't think it is at all.
Fantastic. Well, you chose a song for us today, Kellie. What would that song be?
That would be Guns N' Roses' Sweet Child of Mine.
A great song. Tell us why you chose that song for our listeners today.
Oh, it's been an all-time favourite of mine since the 80s when it first came out, because I'm that old. And it's always been, it's on my Spotify top 10 list every year. So I love it. It's a powerful song and one that resonates with me.
This is the Business Brunch with Ben and Mike on Get Radio. Our second guest today, I'm really delighted to introduce Alex Minchin of Zest Digital. Welcome, Alex.
Hi, Ben. Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on, Alex. So Alex, tell the listeners about you and your business.
So I run Zest Digital. We're a growth marketing agency. We've been going 10 years last year, which was a big achievement for me, like Kellie. And we effectively help establish B2B businesses to generate more revenue. And we do that by focusing on two areas. So we increase the amount of traffic that goes through to their website or their web properties, and the conversion rate, so the rate at which they convert visitors into any action of their choosing. We do that by focusing on it's effectively a journey. So we take customers from point A to point B. Point A is normally a point of frustration. So, for example, not having enough leads is an obvious one. And then we go through a series of exercises. So looking at things like customer profiling, messaging to make sure we're focusing on benefit-led statements rather than sort of businesses talking about themselves, which they're all very prone to doing really well. And we effectively use things like search engine optimization or SEO and PPC to be able to do that. But we also blend in outreach, so using one-to-one communication through LinkedIn and Kelly's going to kill me, but cold email to be able to reach people on a one-to-one basis.
Absolutely. And to a novice, the digital world is really complex and ever changing. How complex is it, and how ever changing is the world?
It is a really complex area, but I think most businesses overcomplicate it. If you think about a small business or a medium-sized business, a lot of the time you don't even have the resource to put into some of the more complex ways of looking at it. There's lots of acronyms involved. There's lots of different platforms and channels and things that you can use. But in a sense, it's no more complex than looking at a bricks and mortar business. What you're looking at is how many people can you attract into your shop or your shop window or your office or whatever, and how many people that step in take action and take an action that you want them to. So in the same way, online, you're trying to generate traffic and you're trying to attract relevant visitors and targeted visitors that match your customer profile. And then once they are within your web properties, then you're trying to help influence what the actions they take. So you're not trying to manipulate someone. You're just trying to give them extra value and to make sure that you're focused on their pain points and the ambitions and the aspirations they have, and trying to match those points until the point that you get a conversion. So actually, sometimes the more simple you keep it, the better it is, and it's much more easier to manage that way.
Absolutely. And again, apologies, it may be my novice brain here, but you see a lot of people spending a lot of money doing this themselves, and trying and quite honestly failing. You hear a lot of stories about it. How easy is it to do it wrong and spend a lot of money?
so easy. It's so easy to spend money. And if you look at the major platforms, Google, Facebook, any one of them really, they all make it very, very easy to advertise, and they do a lot of stuff around things like auto bidding and auto optimization. Now, those things can be really powerful once you actually have the recipe. If you don't have the recipe, it's just a free shot at spending all your money on making things happen. The other side of it is, yes, they do want you to succeed, but they'll take as much as possible to be able to help you to do that. On an SEO point of view, it's the time. A lot of people don't give it enough time. It's better to do one bit of quality content. A bit of quality content should take at least half a day, and that's just an entry point. Most businesses that we come across, a lot of the time, the content's so weak and so thin that it's not even worth writing in the first place. So what you tend to get is businesses that they go at it on their own, but they don't have the knowledge or skill or tools to be able to know what to do. And therefore what happens is they start to put out content and it becomes an activity-based game rather than a results-based game. There's no outcomes. And if you're not measuring the right things and knowing what to look for, you can spend all day just chasing your tail. I think one of the other big things for us that we see all the time is businesses trying so many different channels. And each one of those channels can either be a career in itself or at least a part-time position to be able to manage it. So when you see people on LinkedIn running Google AdWords, running Facebook ads, doing some SEO, doing some content, trying to do some link building, all of these things are kind of big activities to undertake in their own right. So again, the message really is about being simplifying it down, being really focused and focusing on outcomes, not the inputs.
Absolutely. Really good advice. Really, really good advice. And of course, the recruiter in the room will turn it to a recruitment question. I know that your sector is incredibly hard to hire talent. And you've had an interesting change in your business over the last 12 months, haven't you?
I have, yeah. So we went remote pre-COVID. So we basically, I went through the same issues with my business over the last 4 years, really, which is finding it very difficult to find talent and to hold that talent. Based on the geographical location that we're in, we're very lucky to live in a place like Oxfordshire, but it's a very sparse county and a very expensive county to live in as well. So for us, it became a recurring problem. In October 2019, I decided that we were going to go fully remote and that an office was no longer something that we needed. It actually became a hindrance because it meant we were geographically limited. Almost like I describe it as like a bit of a ball and chain scenario. So we announced that to the team in Jan, and then from Jan to March the 2nd, we went remote on March the 2nd, days before obviously the pandemic hit. So we were very fortunate because we managed to go remote by choice, not necessity. And that saved us a lot of time and headaches as well over that time. And I consulted quite a few businesses and helped a few businesses through that period. How it's benefited us really is, it's not for everyone. I think people say, oh, go remote, it's going to save you loads of money because you're not going to have an office. It's not that at all. I think it's a different set of challenges that you face. So for us, the recruitment and level of recruitment that we're after, that was a consistent problem for us. So we just simply removed that problem. We face new challenges. Of course, you've got to keep your team motivated. But for us, we no longer have the issue of recruitment because we recruit across a time zone, not geographical convenience.
Amazing. Oh, thanks so much for that, Alex. It's a real absolute pleasure to have you on the show. So now coming on to your song. So you get to choose a song to come on the radio today. What's your choice?
I do. I'm going to go for Red Hot Chili Peppers, Can't Stop.
Perfect. So why that song?
It just gets me hyped up every time I listen to it. I think it's one of those songs that just gets you lifted. And I think we've gone through a hard year, 2020. It's been, even if it's been good for you, it's been busy. And if it hasn't been busy, it's been not busy at all. So I think it's just a nice way to get everyone fired up for a new year, new opportunities in 2021.
Perfect. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks for joining us this morning and sharing your overview of your business. We'll welcome you back in a short while for our debate later in the show. This is Get Radio, and this is the Business Brunch with Ben and Mike. And our third guest today is Jane Fryatt from Face to Face HR. Welcome, Jane.
Hi, Mike. Lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you as a guest with us this morning. So, first of all, if you could just tell our listeners a little bit more about you and your business, that'd be great.
Sure. My name's Jane. I'm based in Wallingford here in South Oxfordshire, and I run Face to Face HR, which is an HR consultancy specialising in small businesses. So helping small businesses to look after their people, treat them right, make sure they're on the right side of the law and get the best from them, really. So I work specifically with businesses of under 50 staff who want to grow and who want to get their people looked after in the right way, and I support them by becoming their internal HR person effectively. So making sure they've got the right documentation, that their business is protected, and that they put the right things in place for them to grow.
Thanks, Jane. And what's the hot topics that you're seeing right now that businesses are facing from a HR perspective?
Well, it's some of what Alex mentioned, actually. How do we manage people who are working remotely? Obviously, a lot of businesses have gone to remote working very rapidly without perhaps the right infrastructure, but more importantly, the right approach from the management team. And it is really a different way of managing. Whilst all the principles are the same, getting the best from your people, it is different. It is different performance managing people, making sure, if you're recruiting people in a virtual world, it's really challenging to get across the culture of your business and make sure they're cohesive as a team. So lots of challenges around that. And actually, people who've worked together for a long time, I'm seeing relationships being quite strained because they're used to seeing each other and obviously they're not. And people, I think well-being is another really hot topic, employee well-being. How are we making sure that people are looking after themselves, and that kind of fear factor that we've got around us at the moment with COVID is really challenging. And that's showing in the workplace, in terms of people bringing some of those issues in with them and, just feeling the stress of it all.
And have your clients been sort of building that in terms of the well-being and the remote? Are they sort of linking those two things together well?
Yeah, I think people haven't underestimated, the impact on staff who are working from home. Some of my clients employ quite young workers. They don't really have the setup at home. They're working from their bedrooms, or they've got other housemates who perhaps are furloughed and they're trying to work, and that's really challenging. So, yeah, there's lots you can do to support, whether it's just allowing people to flex their working hours, or giving them access to resources like employee assistance programs, that kind of thing, or even just making sure that you talk to them regularly, giving them a call and just being supportive. It doesn't have to cost the earth. Obviously, there are things you can do, which do cost a bit more, but often it's just the basics, getting the basics right.
And from, I guess the word that's on the lips of everybody at the moment is redundancy. But yeah. I know we were speaking just before Christmas and you hadn't done that many redundancy jobs. Do you think that's because the government support scheme has supported businesses in that way? Or do you think people are not making the redundancies? How are you seeing things?
Yeah, I think obviously the coronavirus job retention scheme had a massive impact and has allowed businesses to retain staff on furlough, for much, much longer than they ever would have done had that scheme not existed. A lot of my clients are in the kind of tech area, so they haven't needed to make redundancies. They have just transferred, very similar to yourself, Alex, transferred completely their whole operation to a working from home format, and they're actually growing and seeing, good business. I do have clients in the hospitality sector, which obviously has been impacted really, really hard, but they know that it's coming back. There's always going to be a need for cafes. There's always going to be a need for restaurants. So they have obviously benefited from the furlough scheme. And so, yeah, it's been quite limited. I work with really quite small businesses. Obviously, there's in the headlines been some huge businesses laying people off. So I think perhaps if you talk to some of the larger employment lawyers, they will have been doing collective consultation over redundancy. But luckily for me, I haven't had to do that.
And And in conversation with some of my clients and other businesses locally, one of the challenges I think most business owners have is having those difficult conversations. You know, when businesses is going along really well and, you know, crest of the wave, not having difficult conversations, it's great. But when you've got to have that, whether it's a performance management conversation or whether it's potentially a redundancy, businesses really then sort of like go, oh my God, I need some help. Is that how you see things?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, usually I get contacted because there is an issue. You know, it does happen, but it's unlikely that someone kind of rings me up and says, oh, I just want to make sure all my HR documents are in order. It's a bit like with you, Kelly, I'm sure. It's when they're facing an issue and they think, oh my goodness, I need some support with this. And yeah, giving feedback, negative feedback is not something any of us likes doing, of course. And particularly in a small business, it's really, really personal. You know, you've probably worked with these people for a long period of time. They're not just colleagues, they're friends, and suddenly having to have that conversation. I mean, the one thing I would say is prepare. You cannot do those type of conversations off the cuff. You know, make sure you've prepared, make sure you've practiced that one sentence, the critical piece of feedback that you want them to walk out of the room remembering, say it over and over again, and then it'll come out right. But I prepare scripts for my clients for those type of conversations, and they don't have to stick religiously to the script, but you know how easy it is to kind of go off the message, you know, if you're in a conversation like that. So having a script is just a prop, really.
And I was reading an article at the weekend whereby it was a CEO of quite a large firm, and the concern within their business was if they start to make redundancies, how it will open up the avenues of whistleblowing. Is that something you're seeing in your sector?
I have actually just dealt with a whistleblowing case, which it was quite an interesting one actually, because it came on top of an original grievance, then a dismissal, then a whistleblowing, then a subject access request, you know, throw the toolbox at you sort of thing. So whistleblowing, in my experience, is not so common, I have to say. I think it is increasingly common when there is some sort of dispute in the workplace for an employee to put in a subject access request. Mainly, I think, because they're probably being advised to do that, because it makes the employers usually sort of forces them to think, oh, this is all too much, let's go to a settlement. And it's part of like a strategy, you know, to get a payoff. But yeah, whistleblowing less common, I would say, particularly in smaller organizations. You don't really hear of that so much. You know, since I've had my business 2.5 years, I think I've dealt with maybe 2. So.
And as I mentioned to Kelly, the elephant that's been in the room for the last couple of months is Brexit. And I saw a blog article that you shared about the impact of Brexit and overseas workers. Is that an issue that you're seeing?
I've got a couple of clients who are in the kind of science area who are looking at, a bit like what you were saying, Alex, the talent that is quite difficult to recruit. So they were looking wider and sort of asking me, how am I going to get people over from Europe now? And obviously there are ways, particularly if they're STEM businesses, you know, they're going to fall into that kind of skilled worker category. So, I mean, I think the scheme, it looks reasonable. You know, I think the types of clients I work with, I don't think they have an issue. It's not cheap, obviously, but, you know, there's a way for them to get workers over here. I think businesses that are employing large numbers, perhaps of low-skilled workers, they're going to struggle a bit more because of the, you know, the criteria that's been put into the points-based system. So we'll just have to see. Not many employers I work with, I don't think it will necessarily affect, you know, from an employment perspective. I think there are other impacts, obviously, but yeah, it's interesting.
Well, thanks, Jane. Thanks for giving us an insight into the world of HR and the work that you do. As with Kelly and Alex, who introduced a song earlier, it's your opportunity to tell us a song that you've chosen for the listeners.
Yes. So it's not actually me that's chosen this. This is my kids. I will get strung up if I don't ask for George Ezra Shotgun. This is what gets shouted at Alexa most days in our household. So there we go, Shotgun.
So instead of me asking you, the reason you chose that song is that your kids told you to.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
This is the Business Brunch with Ben and Mike on Get Radio. Our show aims to share the knowledge, expertise and experience of our guests whilst also debating some of the issues and hot topics that are impacting the local business community. Today, our topic is what the business world is looking like with COVID and Brexit going into 2021. For this part of the show, we welcome back our three guests. So we've got Kellie Peters of Databasix, Alex Minchin of Zest Digital, and Jane Fryatt of Face to Face HR for a roundtable discussion.
Yeah, and to kick off this discussion, I'm going to ask Kellie, first of all, what changes have you seen, Kellie, in the last year that you feel have impacted businesses that they're going to take forward into 2021?
I think the digital transformation that has taken place has been pretty phenomenal. I've worked in technology for a number of years now, and I've never seen so many quick decisions to adopt new technology. What I would hope that they would have done a risk assessment on those systems. But I think the adoption to be able to facilitate the working from home, the digital transformation has had to happen to support that.
Mm. And a question for Alex. We have touched on Brexit a little bit, but from a marketing standpoint, how is Brexit going to impact some of your B2B clients in terms of how they market to their audience?
I don't know if it's going to have a massive impact on our clients, but I think in general, it's, I think the fact that we've got to a decision is the most positive thing. Regardless of your political standpoint, I think there's a bit more certainty as to, what's happening. And that means that things like marketing budgets are going to be freed up or at least reallocated in a way that's going to suit the individual business. Apart from that, I think, the only thing I've had discussions around things like the pound and, if the pound weakens and how that's going to affect things or if it strengthens. To be honest, if it weakens, then Britain's going to be more investable from outside the UK potentially, and if it strengthens, then you're going to get sort of value for money in terms of software, like what Kellie touched on. We're all using software. A lot of this software is dollar based, and we see fluctuations all the time in our spending. But I think there's, for me, so far, fingers crossed, I don't think there's going to be the impact that I think many have feared beforehand.
Mm-hmm. When Kellie talks about digital transformation, Alex, what sort of things has your business adapted, if you like, or adopted for digital transformation?
I think the main. We were quite geared for remote working in a way. When I went through the decision of let's take our business remote, it was because I was in the office and we were quite silent, and I knew conversations were happening, but everyone was using we use Slack, so everyone was using Slack anyway. And the reason why that was because whenever there was a conversation in the office, it's a massive distraction to people, especially in an open plan office. I can't stress enough how unproductive an open plan office can be. So for us, we already had that kind of infrastructure there. I think the digital transformation for us, which I don't know whether you could class it as digital in itself, but touching on what Jane mentioned, was really focusing on the team. How do we make sure that the team stay as one? And we've got people, when I say sort of we work with people further afield, that's everywhere from London, Edinburgh, Poole in Dorset, Shropshire, right the way through to people in Berlin, Barcelona, and sort of European countries as well. So for us, it was how do we make sure that there's something always on the horizon? And that was an amazing bit of advice that was given to me by one of my friends who manages a team on the West Coast for a large data company in the UK, based in London. I said to him, "What do I need to do?" And he said, "Always have something on the horizon. Always, it's the most important thing that your people." The people that work with you and for you know that there is something sociable to look forward to. And so for me, that was the biggest transformation, because it really made, our office manager, who had no office to manage anymore, became our internal events manager. So really focusing on making sure that at least every week or every 2 weeks, we've got something in that the team can look forward to, no matter how small. And I think we saw that across the board, really. People doing, Zoom lunches or, games and challenges, things like that. I think that's the biggest thing for us.
Couldn't agree more, Alex. I think that when I look at the clients that we work with that retain staff really, really well, I think that there's two reasons, and I think both come under the remit of something to look forward to. It's either something to work towards in terms of career progression and how can they progress their career, and something to look forward to outside work. So even if it is just that Zoom quiz, or even if it is just the night out in prior to COVID times, that is those are the two single things that we see the most in terms of retention of staff. Jane, what do you find with your clients in this area in terms of kind of that real kind of morale boosting? What works well for your clients?
Well, I think that sounds absolutely great, Alex, what you've said. But also just going back to what Kellie said, I really noticed the kind of desire for clients to adopt sort of HR software, because obviously all their employee records would be either on, one person's Excel spreadsheet that no one else could access, and if they were furloughed, they were a bit stuffed, or in a paper drawer. So at the first part of lockdown, I got a lot of clients onto Breathe, which is a really simple sort of SME HR software system. So that's been really good. And that can be a driver of engagement at the kind of basic level, people having control over their data, control over when they book their leave, visibility of how much leave they've got remaining, that sort of thing. So, and then obviously we've had the whole kind of Zoom virtual lunches or Zoom socials, quizzes, all of that sort of thing. Some of my clients have looked for slightly more innovative things than that. I think Zoom fatigue set in fairly rapidly, didn't it? So we've had some fun sessions on certain other types of software which are a bit more interactive, allow people to move around a bit more than I think Zoom has actually adopted that now, hasn't it? Being able to move around breakout rooms. So but also sending people stuff. A few of my clients sent out little thank you gift packs to staff. I think that's had quite a nice impact. But obviously, one of the biggest things I would say from this whole experience is just showing how flexible working can work, and working from home isn't kind of equal to non-productivity, or your staff are not doing their washing all day. In fact, most of them are probably working a lot harder. I had very few issues from clients relating to employees who were shirking, because they're home working. In fact, it's more the opposite. How do we make sure people are taking breaks? How do we make sure they're not getting burnt out? So I think I really, really hope that businesses take this into 2021 and beyond, that let people start work when they want to. Some people just aren't morning people, they'll work so much better in the afternoon. Let them start at 10. Why would you make them start at 8? I just think, I really hope businesses take that seriously and do see that there is a massive productivity gain from allowing people to have more control over their working hours.
And when we pull that all together, Kellie, we pull this, what you mentioned, digital transformation. We talk about working from home. I'm sure you've seen some of the risks that can create for a business. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about those?
I think some of the things that Jane said earlier, it's like if you're living in a shared accommodation and you're all working for different companies and you're all on your laptops, possibly all on different video calls, there's the real risk that you're disclosing information that is confidential to the business inadvertently with other organisations who are also on video calls. And I think it's making sure that staff know where they can be in their home that prevents or reduces that kind of risk, without saying you can only be in one room in the entire house during lockdown. One of the things I said a lot about is really be mindful of what's behind you on a video. call and stuff, because I think hilariously one of my most popular posts on LinkedIn was me showing someone, a wife thought she was being quite funny to her husband, flashed the husband, apart from the fact there was a mirror behind the husband and he's on a video conference, and her image is now projected onto everybody else. So it's like, just be a bit mindful of your setting. You know, I didn't think it'd be that popular, but it was. And I think then it's also, if you've got home devices like Alexa or Google Home and stuff, if you're going to have really confidential conversations, I would just recommend that you switch those off, because they are always on, they're always listening. And then just make sure that people know if something goes wrong, who to talk to. Because if you're in an office and you have one of those moments where you've done something silly, you can tell by someone's body language, because they're like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. Whereas if they're at home, you don't see that. So you need to be able to give them the confidence that they can put their hand up and say, I've made a mistake, you know, can you help me? Because it'd be very easy to hide data breaches if your culture is one of don't be honest, don't put your hand up, we don't want to know.
I think there's a real risk with that, with Zoom making meetings so one way as well, that the culture almost becomes, there's a real risk that people just don't speak up, because every single team meeting is just one person talking. And if you're trying to get through Zoom meetings quickly, you're almost quashing any debate, which obviously stifles creativity and innovation and being able to speak up, like you're saying, Kellie.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we do for that, Jane, is we implemented silent meetings. And what we do is, let's say the meeting's an hour, it will still be an hour, but maybe 30 minutes of that is in silence. So we create a doc, and then everyone jumps onto the doc, and you all put your comments against the key points of that agenda. And then the remainder of the meeting is then to discuss the comments, so that it tries to stop someone, so to stop the extroverts from getting all the attention, whereas sometimes some of the introverts might have some really good points, but they're just not confident enough to put themselves forwards and be on screen, really. So it's been really good for us. It was actually made by Twitter, I think, was the guy who runs Twitter was the one who innovated it, and it's been really great for us, especially on in the remote transition.
Great idea. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here, Alex. So sorry in advance, but of all the people that I know in the business world, and you are a friend of mine, but of all the people that I know in the business world, your business is by far the most advanced, and so in terms of kind of some of the ideas and the creativity that you implement. Have you got any advice for people listening of anything that they could implement into any business?
What? I mean, that's a wide open question, but I think the whole remote side, I think, just we talk about digital transformation, and that is clearly the big shift, but it's also a human transformation, and you always have to think human first and think about your people, think about your clients and how they're working with you, and just look for different ways. So, for example, for us, when we moved remote, we lost a simple thing, a whiteboard. Like, you don't realize that a whiteboard is quite a good way of coming up with new ideas and brainstorming and things like that with other colleagues. So using software like Miro is a really simple fix for that. It's a simple solution. Things like silent meetings, they get around the idea that when you're on a call with Zoom, look for the potential obstacles in front of you. That's what we tend to do, or that's what I tend to do. I look for friction points. So when we're on a Zoom call like this, and you've got one person speaking like I am now, it means that there's not enough room for other people to speak. And in the Zoom world, you can't have two people speaking without alienating everyone else, which is why something like silent meetings, was such a great way to fix new problems like that you face. But for me, in terms of the answer to your question, I don't know whether I can give anything specific, because every business will be so different. But for me, I map out every single part of every single system of our business. And I look at each individual part, and I try and either simplify it. I try and create, so we have 3 words in our business. We have focus, discipline, and simplicity. And whatever the point in the process is, it has to tick one of those boxes confidently. And if we can simplify something, we will. And we try and open that up to the team as well. Like today, for example, we've started obviously a new year today. We've taken our what we call our growth huddle, which is our sales and marketing meeting, effectively. Now that ran on for an hour and a half. So for me, that's too long. There's no way it should be that long. And actually, my whole team agreed. So there's 4 of us on that call, and soon to be a 5th person who started today with us. So if you add that up, that's 6 hours per person per month if you did it weekly like we did. So we went through it today and we were like, where can we, how can we optimize this meeting? And that was something really simple. Like, we don't need to do it every week. We realized that actually the changes on a weekly basis were almost non-existent. Like, every now and again you would, but a lot of the time there's not enough to talk about because a week's not long enough often to get a lot of stuff done. So, we've just halved it. Immediately, we've got half the time back of time that was not really being used in a valuable, productive way. So that's one example of how to do things. I think just like for me, I work 4 days a week. And I take my Fridays off, and I did that for pretty much a whole year before COVID hit. When COVID hit, I jumped back into to working 5 days a week. But that 5th day it's a day off if I want it to be, but really it's a day for me to really do some deep thinking. And I think many businesses undervalue and underappreciate the strength of doing that. So on a Friday, pre-COVID, I would literally go away and I would tackle one specific issue or one specific problem or one specific idea. And I'd just spend my time on that. I'll come up with different scenarios. And I think that just allowed me to create more ideas and look at things with different perspectives as well. I think sometimes we can rush things when you're trying to improve things. You just see the first thing and you go for it. Ask the right questions.
I would just add to that, we use Slack for what you discussed in terms of throwing ideas out, because you're right, we don't have a whiteboard anymore, and we used to have one in the center of our desks. So we use Slack, and we have various different channels that say, if there's something funky in the news that you've read, put it in this channel. If you've got a really new idea. And to be honest, the first time I come across Slack is when I was in your office, Alex, a couple of years ago. And I was like, it's a really funky piece of technology that allows good conversation to just go on the fly. And I really liked that. And you can have a fun channel. It doesn't have to be work. So no, I would encourage people to think outside the box when it comes to technology, because I like the human aspect of it. It's got to be people driven.
I think that's the interesting thing for me for 2020 really is that 2020 was probably, with COVID pandemic, was an intervention that most businesses obviously didn't want, but it was a good opportunity for many businesses to reflect on what they were doing and what changes they could make and what things that they could bring into their business, improvements that they could make. So is there any particular improvements that you've seen in either your own business or other businesses that you think businesses will adopt in 2021?
I think for me, you've just got to try new things and see if they work. So I'm always going to say, from a data protection perspective, understand the risk associated with that piece of technology, but don't be afraid to adopt technology. It doesn't take months to go from a rolling something out to implementation. You can move really swiftly. 2020 proved that. So find compatible systems and be open to your staff putting forward a suggestion of, hey, why don't we try this? And why not? If you've got nothing to lose, it brings your team together. So allow, technologies to support your decision making, and your creativity.
I'd also add something to that, because I think one of the things we're at risk of is almost over adoption. So it's very easy to bring up new software, new things, new toys. I'm the worst for it, and I always have been. And I think for us, I think the same with the question you asked about digital marketing in general, Ben, is it's very easy to do everything. And the same with software. It's very easy to find software that will fix it. But just being mindful that, you can't just put software in. It needs training. It needs a process. It needs the data stuff sorted. It's going to be, you're going to be having a new bill each month. It's got to work with other things, and other platforms. So for us, it's like, start grading stuff and making sure that it's actually going to solve the problem. Because a lot of the time, if you don't ask the right questions, you don't actually find the root cause. You don't find the root of the problem. And that's the whole deep thinking part, is if you're asking the wrong questions, you get to the wrong answers. And if you get to the wrong answers, you'll put software in. It's just like putting a plaster on. So I think definitely adopt new technologies, but do it with caution and just take an extra day.
I think it's a really good point. When we were in the first lockdown, I was getting all my clients to review their costs in their business and making sure that they were looking at their expenditure as either a cost or an investment. And I had one of my clients had £1,000 per month that they were spending on software that they weren't using because they'd done exactly that. They'd gone to the next shiny thing or the next thing that they would try, but never got round to trying it. So easily just cut that through.
Yeah.
What about yourself, Jane? Anything that you've seen from 2020 that you think will take forward into 2021?
Yeah, I've seen some clients, particularly in the retail side, go online and say, they've done way better than they'd expected, and that'll be part of their offer going forward. I mean, I think they'll all go back to trading with the shop front as well, but, having an online arm to their business that perhaps they would never have done or maybe wouldn't have done certainly last year, so that's been great. I just think how innovative some people have been, particularly thinking hospitality sector again, how they've had to suddenly, change to doing takeaways and getting people in and out of their venues without, being sort of COVID secure. And yeah, it's amazing how resilient some businesses have been. And actually, there's very few businesses I know that have ceased trading. They've all found some sort of way to survive and continue. And whether it's in a similar form or a completely different form, they've carried on, which is just amazing.
I think resilience will be one of the biggest things that most businesses will take into 2021, won't it? In terms of still being within a pandemic lockdown, but also resilience to other factors that influence on their business. Yeah. And
realising that some of the great people that they do have, who have been willing to roll with the punches and, get on with life and work in some really, really challenging circumstances for some people, and that's been really amazing as well. I think they come out of it a stronger team.
And
sorry, I was just going to add, I think with what Jane said earlier, I think actually realizing that you can do flexible working, and it does work. And I think the main thing is that the big companies now have no excuse. They can't just say it doesn't work because they've had to put it in place, and now we can see that it does work in many cases. So I think for us, it's like, and I know we're thinking way ahead now, but for us, I'm planning for when the normal is for people to have more than one job. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but that's how I believe that the world is going. I see that diversification in employment will become a bigger thing. Diversification in terms of the career paths that you have, maybe. I think that shift will continue into 2021 and beyond.
Based on what you were saying, Alex, I'd like to sort of flip our topic on its head a little bit today. So we've talked about some big birthdays, 10th birthday, 7th birthday, etc. And we've been talking about the business world is changing. But what is perhaps the one thing that each of you were doing as a startup that you're still doing now really, really well and you'd still hold on to in your business?
I would say it's something really simple. Regina, my business partner, we just have a laugh. We're still very passionate about what we do and why we do it. And I think if we ever lost that, then I think it's time to exit the business. So I think something that we've always come back to is this still what we want to be doing? And are we still excited about what we do? And the answer has been yes for the last 7 years. So yeah, excitement and passion.
You certainly got to have something you love doing, haven't you?
Yeah.
Alex, any one thing from your startup that you're still embracing today?
I think I'm glad Kelly went first there, because I had to really think about that one. I think for me, it's operating your business as a business, and it's not about you. It's not about, if it's lifestyle, it's different to a business in some ways, because a business has to have a value attached to the actual, if you were to sell it, it has to have a sellable value. So for me, I've always operated by trying to remove yourself from the process, if you will. And that means that everything you do, you just try and document it. What are the steps that someone else needs to take? We never try and keep it in our head. I remember losing my first person and a really good friend of mine, and had so much knowledge of our business. And when they left, they took all that away with them. And, that made me really sort of realize that actually, we really need to be documenting the processes and updating them. So for us, it's about, doing that, but empowering the team to be able to do it. So everyone that comes in on every single job spec that we have and job role, one of those key points is to update your own process and to make sure it's documented. And that's just one of the things we've maintained since very early on.
Great. And Jane, do you want to add anything from what you're going to carry on?
Yeah, sure. And I think it's got to be like networking and continuing to do that. It would have been very easy at the beginning of lockdown to like curl up in a ball and just like homeschooling and all this rubbish and not carry on networking. And obviously online, it's not quite the same as in person, but it's so important, like for your own well-being, like connecting with people, collaborating with people, sharing a laugh with people, finding out, like being curious about other people's businesses. It's why I went into business. I love talking about why people are doing stuff and what their motivations are. And, I think we've got a great business community. You two are at the heart of it. Oxfordshire is a great place to start a business, but you've got to connect with people. You've got to get out there. You've got to sort of share your story, and it's part of what motivates me to carry on, and do what I'm doing. And yeah, so.
What a great point, Jane. I think just reflecting as the three of you were giving your answers there, the five of us, and actually, to be fair, James as well, we've actually all met as a result of networking. So what a great way to reflect, and what a great endorsement of networking itself. Well, that is the end of the show. Thank you so much to our guests on the Business Brunch today on Get Radio. Just as a reminder, we had Kellie Peters from Databasix, Alex Minchin of Zest Digital, and Jane Fryatt of Face to Face HR. Thank you so much for all of you for your time. We really, really appreciated having you on the show. And thank you so much for the contribution to the discussion.
So you've been listening to the Business Brunch with Ben and Mike on Get Radio. We're back next Sunday at 11 a.m. with 3 more guests and another hot topic for discussion. So enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we'll see you next week when our 3 guests will be Greg Box-Turnbull of Fortitude Communications, who's also the owner of Oxford City Stars Ice Hockey. We'll also have Beverly Sunderland from Crossland Solicitors, and also Emma McGregor from Blocks and Mill. So look forward to you joining us next Sunday.